Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the Monster Dad.
Brian, we were talking about this earlier, but I'm really proud of my shirt.
He is wearing a shirt that says magic is everywhere. And there's a dragon.
But then it also says, you just have to know where to look, which is related to our episode.
That's what t-shirt brand is that?
Marketing. It is Wizard of Barge.
Their shit is dope. This episode is sponsored by...
Wait, did I get that wrong? Is it Boss Dog?
Wizard of Barge. Well, Wizard of Barge is great. What are we doing today, Jonathan?
Man, I feel really bad. I want to get this right.
Well, Brian, we're here to talk to Will Leivenberg.
We're gonna edit this part out, and then I'm gonna get it right because I want to. Wait.
I'm trying to focus on work.
I am too, but this is part of work. Okay, so it must be Wizard of Barge. So I think I can edit that part out. I'm Googling right now.
Unreal. All right,
and it is Wizard of Barge. I was right. You know what? I'm gonna start putting sound effects in this, and I'm gonna put like a Seinfeld audience. Wait, Seinfeld doesn't have a live audience.
Yeah, they do. They fully do. They have a laugh track.
I'm gonna put the crowd cheering track on that I'm not. And edit. So Wizard of Barge made this shirt. Y'all should check them out because they make cool shit. Anyways,
super cool
Brian, you look like you're rubbing your face off.
Yeah, it's because I'm going insane.
Because we had a very interesting conversation with our good buddy Will, and he's a brand marketing director, and he's pretty phenomenal. And we went deep and learned a lot about the monster known as...
Wait, I want to say it. Let me say the monster. Mm-hmm.
Marketaur.
Like a dinosaur, but Marketaur. Mm-hmm. So it's M-A-R...
Yep.
K-E-T-A-U-R. Did I spell that right?
I think you did.
Marketaur.
There it is. That's our monster.
Marketaur, and, unpacking the relationship a little bit between marketing and design, kind of understanding what he does. Mm-hmm. We talked to Will about his early days as a sports journalist working at Bleacher Report, and how working there led to working in brand marketing, and kind of unpacking the major differences between those two fields. So yeah, Will is intensely articulate, very engaging. Mm-hmm. I could have talked to him for a few more hours.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the episode, Jonathan, what do we do?
At the end, we talk about some monsters. And there's some really fun ones pulling from the movies Barbarian, Dune, and The Ritual. So stay tuned for that. Well, one thing I wanted to say too with Will, which is I think really cool, is something we want to do more and more is not just limiting our guests and our topics and our monsters to things that are like really directly related, like scope creep or process or something like that. It's very much like ingrained in that designer lexicon, but things that maybe be a little bit, we feel are more on the outskirts, like marketing, that has to do with what we do as designers, and in some ways has everything to do with what we do as designers. So we want to definitely try to open up to more guests like that, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see how that monster hit list continues to evolve, which is another keyword from today's
evolution.
It's the Pee Wee Herman
How
word
do
of the
you
day.
Change?
Yeah.
Speaking of change, I just want everybody to know my plant has been sprouting this entire time. I've been on this, this episode for over an hour. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the conversation, my sprouting plant was beneath the leaves, and now it is above the leaves.
And the mushrooms that Brian had on his desk are gone. So here you go. Cause and effect.
Oh my god. All right, with that, let's get into it.
Here we go. I don't. I just hit record.
He's just trolling me with his Giants garbage.
He's trying to start a fight. So, for people who don't know, Will, you're a big Dodgers boy, right?
I mean, I wouldn't say boy, but I'm a big Dodger fan. It's in my blood. I feel it very strongly. I think they've changed a lot in the last few years, but I think that it's still pretty important to maintain my fandom. And when I see a Giants hat, it's just like, is it Halloween? Well, what's the deal? I'm just not.
John's
Is it Halloween?
He's just being a dick, like coming out with his Giants hat. So I don't have much skin in this game. I don't know a lot about baseball, but I kind of have a loyalty towards the Dodgers, having grown up in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Love it.
Like 2 against 3, two against 1 here.
But I don't know anything. I went to Dodger games growing up.
But the interesting thing about John, which I think is actually like a thing among fans today for the most part, is he's got hats for every team. So it's like if he's wearing a Giants hat today, I'm not really sure what that means. If tomorrow he's wearing a San Diego Padres hat, both teams in NL West, both teams in California, both teams at the opposite ends of California. Whatever, to each their own. You know what I mean?
Hey, I'm a baseball fan. Unless it's Dodgers. Unless it's Dodgers.
John, I mean, what I like too is that some of your favorite branding on your hats, it resembles a bandwagon, It's just
dagger.
Wow.
Well, can I just ask Brian, not to be cruel, but is this this is just a blank hat you're wearing?
Yes, it is. No,
not
actually,
to be cruel.
I can tell you about this hat.
Well, I'd like to know because it signifies literally nothing.
So if you look,
or everything.
Oh, wow!
If you look, so let me tell you, I got this hat last winter when it was raining a lot because this thing is waterproof.
Ah, okay.
And it's sweatproof. Now, as I'm saying that, I'm realizing
that's a tool.
That is not sweat. There's a little something on the top. That is from the farm, and I need to take care of that action.
Okay.
But it's from the farm. But
I see you still have you still got the sticker on it too.
No, it's not a sticker. It's just like a.
Oh, I thought it was like you still got this, like you're a cool guy. You got the sticker on.
No, dude, I'm not that cool. Okay. It's super comfortable, but the main thing is it's waterproof.
Gotcha.
And it doesn't I need to wash it, but it's it's super durable. I was going through so many other hats. This is what happens when you start losing your hair. You rely on the power of hats.
Yeah,
not great. Yeah. 3 white guys talking about losing their hair. Great content.
No,
super relevant.
Yeah.
Will, you have a ton of hair. John, you have hair.
Every day I'm trying to just be grateful for it.
Question mark. You have hair, I think.
Yeah. No,
I wear hats a lot.
I have the least.
I've got a little bit of the peak kind of going, and so I'm always on the fence. Like I just put a hat on all the time. I'm actually going to grow it out. I'm going to one last try. I'm going to grow it super long. It's going to take probably a couple years. I did it once before, down to here. If you're watching.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
You're going to grow it like Legolas long?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Doing it one last time. Let's see how it goes. Yeah.
God. Okay. Will, welcome to the chaos of Monsters of Design.
Has it begun?
Yeah. It
started about 4 minutes ago, man.
No, but we're going to go through and edit, but this is just what I have to deal with. Well,
as we're going to be doing this, I realize, Brian, I'm going to be thinking about, that was a good moment for a clip for social. I'm going to be like, that was actually nice. Because it's been on my mind. I'm going to grab my water.
It's a good segue to the topic at hand, which is marketing.
Oh.
And the monster is...
Can't wait to talk about this.
Marketaur, like dinosaur.
Marketaur. So we had some debate around how to pronounce this monster.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
At first, John said Marketaur.
Oh, I think you meant Leivenberg. And I was like, here we go again.
No. I've established that. Mr. Will Leivenberg. We've got that on lock.
Thank you.
We don't. I'm pronouncing it Marketaur, like a dinosaur.
Yeah, that's the correct way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
But I was wrong.
No, but Marketaur kind of sounds like a nice, like I could see that in like a Godzilla movie.
Right? Yeah, that does kind of, yeah. But to be correct, to be the, dinosaur side of the pronunciation, it should be Marketaur.
Yeah, okay. Because it goes back with some of what connects back to.
So, Will, you could probably tell right now we chose a really good, solid name for this that's not confusing at all. So we're going to stick with it.
I feel great about it.
It's probably not the best way to market it, but, it's all right.
That's okay. Sometimes it really doesn't matter.
So viral. Yeah. So anyways, marketing. And we're
here.
Will Leivenberg. Just kidding.
Correct.
And I work with Will at YML, Y Media Labs, and Will is the director of brand marketing. That kind of shifted recently, right? It was just like director of marketing, but I think more director of brand marketing is more of the official title.
Yeah, I slid that right on in there. Just
slid the brand. And I think that makes sense because of a lot of, what we do, and I want to hear more from you, but to kind of tee it up, YML, digital product company, we have a brand that we are marketing to the rest of the world. And part of that brand, the biggest part is really our work. And that's what makes up who we are. And so I'm curious, like what does that role look like to you? And then maybe even before that, how'd you get into all of this and Bleacher Report and all that kind of cool stuff that came before?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what a pleasure to be with you two, just podcast legends. Especially Blank Hat Guy. I started in this world with Bleacher Report. I was a sports writer. I thought I wanted to be in some capacity, at the NBA finals, covering March Madness, the Masters, name any big sports event. I grew up playing sports, had Laker and Dodger games on in my family, watching every game over dinner. Like that was sort of the world that I operated in. I came from a family of writers, editors, people really kind of embedded in magazine journalism. And I just kind of have this love for storytelling and how you get something to reach people, whether that's words, whether that's how you think about it visually. And I just really was passionate about it. And Bleacher Report was really cool. I was at school at Berkeley in the Bay Area, and, I wanted to be a writer, but I found this thing called Bleacher Report, which had its own content management system. It was free to sign up, and they had syndication with Yahoo and with an array of local publications. So if I chose to write about, let's say, the Los Angeles Dodgers, my story might get picked up perhaps by the LA Times or the Orange County Register or a publication that could help to spread my name, but definitely the Bleacher Report name too. And it was just really fun to get to pick all the photos for the story, find quotes for every story, think about those stories on the way to class, on the way back. And I turned, the 100, 200 stories that I wrote my sophomore year of college into an internship, turned that into the internship that led to a full-time job out of college. And there were only 15 people when I started, and I was there for 10 years. When I left, it was about 650. Company had been acquired by Turner Sports, which was then Time Warner, which became AT&T. But I kind of turned the sports writing piece of things into brand marketing, because at the end of the day, it's really just about how you tell stories and how you reach people. And I think that's what gets me up.
Cool. So when you were leading up to Bleacher, were you just covering like local sports or just kind of anything that caught your eye?
When it was just me, I was writing about, the nice thing about it was I didn't have an editor. So it was kind of like I could write about anything. They had a queue of stories sitting for editors on their side to review. And then they'd look at headlines, they'd read the story. And then if it was super relevant, if it was high quality, they would push it up to like the front page of the website. That was early days and how that all worked. But I wrote about what I thought was relevant and interesting. Sometimes it was a profile on Tiger Woods. Sometimes it was, hey, did you watch that game last night? San Antonio Spurs are going to win the next championship. Here's 5 reasons why. Big clickbait guy, huge. Top 10 this, top 5 that. And not because I believe in it, but I know it's a lot easier for people to consume stories when it's the 3 reasons why or the top 10 this. That's still totally true today. But, in 2010, Instagram wasn't really around for you to do that as a gallery, right? Or your IG story tiles or a gallery on LinkedIn or TikTok, etc. So coming up with ways to tell those stories was what got me going.
Fascinating.
Awesome. Yeah. I had no idea that. I didn't know you were there for that long, which is crazy because I've probably known you for like 3 years at this point, and I haven't learned that about you yet. But now I know, and that's crazy that I didn't realize it started like that, because I've always seen it as something much bigger, in recent years, being more familiar with it. That's awesome. Yeah, you were there since like the beginning, basically.
And I think, that drew me to YML too, like getting to work in a startup environment. It's kind of a goddamn mess, frankly. And because it's, it's like, oh, you show up and it's like, this is my title, but then here's 40 things that need to get done. And you kind of need to do them. And if you have a sense of entitlement or ego, it's just not going to work. And I think the nice thing about Bleacher Report, especially at that time, was there's 15 people, predominantly men, which was not good, but it was folks who were really passionate about sports, really tapped into digital storytelling, what that looked like to tell those stories on social as well.
Yeah.
And it was folks who just wanted to hang out and do this work. And it just grew so quickly, and the team grew, the funding grew. And then the world that you probably sort of first encountered Bleacher Report in was maybe, I would guess, like 2013, 2014, because when we got acquired, it opened up doors that Turner Sports had, which was, lower third ads mid-game NBA on TNT every Monday and Thursday, right? And I was in charge of choosing and working with designers to create all those ads. What's the content that's relevant? What's the next event that's relevant? What's the story we want to tell? Same thing with MLB playoffs. Same thing with the PGA Championship. Just an array of opportunity to start reaching hundreds of millions of people. And that is wild for a company that really didn't have to do a lot of marketing prior to the actual acquisition. The storytelling and the use of Google Ads in particular, just kind of gamifying Google a little bit too. That's what really helped spread the word.
And so cool.
You're a journalist, you're writing, you're covering these different narratives around sports. How I know you described that there is definitely a connection between what you're doing at Bleacher and brand marketing, but how did you get to the point where you're like, you know what, I want to give marketing a try?
Yeah. Well, there was somebody who was at Bleacher Report who had started like 5 different teams, and every single one kept being kind of like a new success. And I sort of was drawn to why that person had the ear of our CEO when this guy was like 26. I mean, and I was 21. So it was kind of just like, I want to attach myself to that person. And he was starting a new team called the Media Lab, which was meant to be an innovation hub within Bleacher Report. Essentially, how can we start to tell more immersive visual stories and experiment with not just like, hey, this was the game last night. Here's the stats you need to know. Here's who, the guys who are going to make it to the finals this year, All-Star, et cetera. A lot less of like the positioning sports as kind of, I would say maybe our previous generation looked at it, more like simply highlights, stats, box scores. This was like, what's the impact of sports and music? How do you look at sports as a gateway to other categories of culture? And I think that was just something that in 2013, 2014, 2015 just really started to pick up, because you saw, before NBA games, you start seeing Steph Curry and what he's wearing coming down the tunnel, right? It's like my dad would say, who fucking cares what he's wearing? But, that night, John might buy that outfit, right? Like that was sort of the way that goes, right? Or it's like, hey, here's the playlist. Here's the playlist that LeBron is listening to before the game to get him hyped. All of a sudden, the next time Brian's in the gym, he can go on Spotify and find that playlist. Yeah. Like things like that just really intrigued me. So I was able to kind of broker a relationship with this guy, came on to the team, And this was like a mini startup now within Bleacher Report. And we hired 2 motion designers, one guy who now is the director of design at TikTok, who is the most versatile designer I've probably ever met. He can do graphic design, motion design, animation, just across the board. And I was project manager and kind of marketing manager all in one. And we would create ideas and we would just throw shit at the wall, frankly. And we had the sort of backing of the massive following at Bleacher Report to experiment with some of these ideas, some of which were like short form moments for social. Some of them were like deep dives about why Tracy McGrady, never really got his shot or something, right? And it was sort of during that time too, if you remember, the New York Times in 2011 put out a story called Snowfall. It's like the first like immersive parallax. Oh, when you scroll, things move. It was like, if you remember, that's only like 10 and a half years ago, 11 years ago, but that was wild. And this team was meant to sort of create moments that broke the internet like that. Cool. And that team ended up, frankly, changing the whole dynamic of what Bleacher Report became. Our positioning started to change to become more at the intersection of sports and culture because the content we were making just started to really hit, started bringing in brands to advertise with us, started creating opportunities for us to have events. And all of a sudden, I kind of became our brand marketing guy.
Cool.
Fascinating.
That's awesome.
So it just naturally evolved over the course of your time at Bleacher.
I mean, I think in general, like the job of marketers and then the job of marketers' bosses is to have a constant pulse on what's working and what isn't, and sort of be willing to throw things away that don't work, and also, green light things that need to be considered an experiment. But you always need to have a sense of where it's going or what you want it to do. If it has unintended consequences, but they're good, that might open up a new door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. That's awesome. I hadn't thought so clearly about the intersection of sports and culture and that the specific impacts sports has on our culture, which is tremendous. It does have a huge footprint.
Yeah, I mean, think about the World Cup right now in Qatar. Like that's upending a lot of things in politics, in advertising, in just viewership and engagement. But something that we worked on, for instance, just before I left in 2018, the World Cup was coming, and so I ran a project with our editorial team and our video team, basically called Larger Than Life, because the thing that I think Americans are starting to get on track with, but they don't quite realize, is that like everyone here knows LeBron James, right? But everyone around the world knows Ronaldo and Messi and Paul Pogba and Neymar, right? These athletes who are like truly global icons. So I worked with this team to say, how do we turn this into a moment for our brand? How do we position us again at that intersection of sports and culture? And also, how do we do it in a way that's going to really amplify that story for us and then position us as kind of leaders? And so we came up with this kind of cool idea. We were able to get access to Paul Pogba, Neymar, and Mo Salah, who's an amazing Egyptian player. And we created 3 different murals in 3 different cities all around the US. One is a mural that's 70 feet tall that's still in Times Square.
What?
Which is wild. Another one is on the outskirts of the French Quarter in New Orleans. And another one is in Miami for Neymar.
What?
And I'm going for Christmas. I'll have to check that out.
You have to check it out.
Drop me a pin.
The art is incredible. We partnered with this muralist named B. Mike. And basically, like, we were able to introduce Paul Pogba, Neymar, and Mo Salah to this artist, B. Mike, get his interpretation of what made them larger than life. And then meanwhile, we had writers interviewing these guys to also tell their story. So it was a very cool sort of editorial moment paired with like a physical moment with the art, all of which was meant to say to the United States and fans here, like, get in the game, right? Like these guys are bigger than you can possibly imagine. And then the game itself is the world's game, the beautiful game for a reason. So that was a sweet moment.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's interesting because it kind of, especially a lot of the average American's relationship with soccer identifies sort of our American centrism when it comes to sports,
Yep.
right? We have these blinders on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, it's football and the rest of the world. But yeah, exactly.
But we're going to call it this.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, wow.
I think what's...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No. You go.
No, you go.
No, you go.
Right. No, I think what's really cool is I think that concept of storytelling gets lost a lot in marketing. And when it does, I think that's when people are left with a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to storytelling. And I think not just that, but what I'm hearing from you is it's not just, you just got to tell a story when you're marketing something. What it sounds like you're getting at is that what Bleacher Report did and what you did with them is you're looking for the stories that no one's telling. And that's that sort of intersection of sport and culture where it's like, hey, no one's really like touching on this in this way, but it's there. It's already happening. You're seeing the connection of fashion and sports and music and sports, and there's crossover, and even the celebrities that are coming to watch the game, like right at the front, right at the, the best seats in the house. And like, there is this cultural moment that happens when sports is happening. And so I think that's really cool. And I think I've seen a lot of that from what you've been doing at YML. And I'm curious how learning to market in that way and growing that capability and skill set and perspective at Bleacher Report kind of brought you into more of this. I mean, I guess it's still a digital product in a sense, but the product Bleacher Report is creating isn't necessarily the digital product. I mean, but YML, that is what it is. So how did that transition work when it comes to that sort of unique storytelling approach? Like
specifically to the main difference I'm seeing between Bleacher is sports and culture, and then YML, which is there's a Silicon Valley narrative and storytelling, which is very different than sports and culture. So describe that.
Totally.
Describe that transition.
So, a couple things. I think John, what you just shared is spot on. So that's I'm a big believer in that exact idea. And I think just to unpack it briefly further is, the interesting thing about marketing, and I think what's happened, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, is like, oh, you know what I need? A performance marketing person. Oh, you know what I need is a paid media marketing specialist. Oh, you know what I need? Someone who does content marketing, right? There's all these different lanes of marketing, and they're all very important. But I think the one that I like most and am drawn to most and want to believe I excel at is the conversation that has to go down at the very foundational level, which is what makes my brand different than every other brand, like the differentiation story. And for Bleacher Report, in that moment, we had differentiated ourselves for the first few years purely through the massive volume of stories that we were creating that we knew aligned with people's search intent on Google. That was like a very clear moment that we owned. And then all of a sudden, CBS Sports, The Athletic, an array of other old school and new school brands started to pick that up. So the Media Lab was sort of the solution, if possible, to say what's going to be next. And that intersection of sports and culture became our point of differentiation. There wasn't another brand out there that could own storytelling in that way, both substantive, long form, meaningful stories, as well as short form, quick hits on social, and then events, and then apparel, and then this and that, right? So that ability to do that, I think, is super hard. It requires having a sense of, well, what's the context of the space you're in, right? Who are the leaders? Why are they the leaders? Who's coming up? What do they do differently? How much money do you need to do these things? Who are the people you need, right? So all of that factors into how you ultimately create that story. But I mean, listen, the transition from Bleacher Report to YML, and I would say this to our CEO, I'll say it to you, was a goddamn mess. And that was because, changing jobs is hard, right? I'm sure for either of you, for anyone listening, changing jobs, especially going from a world like B2C, right? Business to consumer versus B2B, business to business, super different because your audience is super different, right? I can't remember very many times in 10 years of Bleacher Report, approaching a big project and the goal being make money, And that's not a diss at the services world that we're in now at YML. Like, that's just like real. But at YML, it's like, well, we're accountable for X amount of dollars. Marketing has to drive that. So draw a line between the thing you just invested your time in and revenue. And that's a really difficult thing to do. And, you know, I can do my storytelling thing. I can bring that to life on social, right? Like, I can create an event. Like, I feel like, you know, I can amplify stories and make sure they come off in a really premium way. But ensuring that someone who has a lot of money sees that, ensuring that every single touch point of your brand is really spot on and consistent, whether they find you on Google, whether they find you through a Medium article, whether someone goes to the website, sees a case study, something on social, hears about you from a friend of a friend, like all of those things you really need to control so that, you know, the executive who has a budget to get something done and then finds that YML has the power, the solution, the proof to give, you know, that person enough trust to then say, okay, let's work on this project for the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, for $500,000. That's a big deal. And that took me a long time to figure out at YML. But luckily, there's just sharp people here, or at YML. There's just really, really, really thoughtful, like experienced folks who I could learn from, who were patient with me, and who I think were open to the idea of changing the game a little bit with how YML had been running prior to me joining.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely echo that. And even working on, I won't say who it is yet, we'll leave it as a surprise, but the current case study we're working on together, you, myself, you know, a number of people, working with two of our really awesome creative directors, Soli and Craig Kind. The way they're driving, they've been pushing me in such a cool way. And I've learned so much from working with the two of them on this project of like, what do the executives want to see in this case study? And how are we going to tell that story? And it's just been so cool to see it come together. And I think yesterday we all kind of saw it pay off, like everyone's work coming in and then us doing a review with our you know, our executive team and seeing them feel really good about it. And it's like, it's so cool to see. I was telling Craig, I was like, I feel like we're developing a style for our case studies and even our case study videos. Like they feel like YMO, but I think that's because of the nuts and bolts. It's because of what we are starting to uncover, which sounds like a lot of what you're doing at Bleacher Report. So I would, a lot of that credit I think goes to you and what you're trying to shape in terms of how we should do these case studies is coming through even in our case study videos. And that's why they feel YML, because of what they're saying, not just how they look, where I'm not going to name them, but there's some other agencies that we point to and we're like, these are cool. And they have a vibe and they have a style because they do things a certain way. And that's cool. But honestly, like when we hold them up side by side, I'm like, man, ours say so much more. So,
well, exactly. And I think like going back to Marketaur and all these pieces, it's like the marketer's job, in my opinion, is to be Marketaur. The marketer's job, in my opinion, is to be consistently accountable for what your audience gives a shit about. You know, because if I bring a project to 4 or 5 other people, right, who are the folks I need to help me bring that vision to life, like, Jon, you can do things that I just simply cannot do with design, with video, and I'm so grateful. But sometimes, right, you or folks in a different path will stray away and be like, I had this cool idea. And I'm like, what you just made is really sick. The problem is, it has literally nothing to do with what our audience gives a shit about. Or it's like, hey, we should save that thing because it's cool. But for this, we just need to bring it right back here. And, you know, that's really tough because I think people then sometimes resent marketing because it's like, oh, all you care about is money.
Just gonna say,
all you care about is this. Well, frankly, someone has to. There's a version of creativity and sales that can kind of live in the middle. And frankly, marketing is that sweet spot, right? It has to appreciate and inspire briefs and then be accountable for how that impact, once that thing is live, drives impact for the business or for the team or recruitment or whatever the goals are.
Yeah. So this is one thing I want to touch on. And this is the perfect segue because Monsters of Design, like the whole purpose of it, right, is that we're creating these monsters, or really just giving names to these monsters that I think as designers, this is definitely for a wider audience, but I think as designers, sure, we're growing through our career and we're bumping up against these things that we don't quite understand yet, that we're wrestling with, that sometimes we feel like are out to get us and are haunting us. And I know that for me early on, exactly what you're just talking about.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes like, and I still do it. Like you're just like, yeah, Jon still does. And I do, like, because I'm always thinking like, oh, that's so cool. And I have to be reined in. And I think all of us kind of have to a certain extent. But when you're younger as a designer and you're early on in your career, you are very much looking to see what is cool. And that is kind of part of your job when you're younger. You definitely want to be bringing the ideas in for someone that's maybe like a lead or an art director or creative director, whoever that is leading the ideas a little bit more. And you're sort of supposed to help support that. But early on, I definitely felt tension with people that were more in the quote unquote marketing space. Yeah. And so that marketing person was a monster to me. I remember feeling that way, and I don't feel that way anymore. I definitely embrace it. And I think working with you so directly, especially when I first started at YMO, we were like besties, like we worked together every day. And I think like that really helped me grow. Yeah. Yeah, totally. So I'm curious, like what has been, you know, with that big mouthful of explanation, what has been your experience being in the marketing space, working with designers? How have you seen that tension and friction take place along the way?
I kind of anticipated a question about this a little bit, and I just wanted to share one small anecdote. Like, I'm like a relatively probably type A-ish person. I like things a certain way, but I also think I appreciate creativity. I like working with creative people. I like breaking, you know, the bounds of what's kind of expected. And in that Media Lab team, we hired this designer, the guy who I said is now like the most versatile designer I've ever worked with. And, you know, like I'd come in, I'd show up like, you know, tucked in shirt, you know, kind of like prepared for my day. Let's do this, everybody. And this guy, I would say, I'd get in maybe 7:45, 8 a.m. for me. I already had my coffee. I'm like, I got my list of shit to do. Let's go. Right. This guy, maybe 10-ish, rolls in and I'm like, where you been?
I could just see that going down so well with Will.
I was busy getting inspired, man.
But then it's like, you know, the guy would pump out just incredible work and have really great ideas. But I didn't understand, and I don't want to generalize with designers, but I didn't understand that some creative folks, like, you don't put chains on these people. You don't give them times to come in. Like, and I swear to God, like, oh, we have a meeting. Like, it was so bizarre to me that that was our fundamental break, is sort of like my appreciation for sort of structure and rules a little bit, and his sort of like, what's the big deal? Like, we're going to get the work done. And I'm like, yeah, but we're going to end up doing it on your schedule, which is no schedule. And that then affects deadlines, that affects budgets, that affects how we communicate things back to people. And that was stuff that I was accountable for. So I just feel like that was one of my first encounters working with plus kind of managing a designer. But he is undeniably someone who's taught me more than anybody else. And frankly, I wouldn't be where I'm at without him, because his ability to make my briefs or my ideas better, or then sometimes just say, okay, I think I know what you mean. I'll be back in 2 hours, and then comes back suddenly with like an animatic for something, or like, hey, I have this mood board. What do you think about this? It showed me so much. And, you know, working with creative directors, designers today, like I've worked with now a lot of cool illustrators and muralists from Bleacher Report, like I mentioned too.
Sorry, I have to close out because I know Brian and I are going to start cracking up.
What happened?
I don't know if you saw this, and I'm really happy we're doing video now. And I know it's rude for interrupting, but Brian and I were about to break out in like some serious laughter.
I just did this.
Brian
just did this. If you're listening to this on Spotify, go watch the video because it's pretty fucking hilarious.
I'm like, it's because I was so intently listening to Will, and you know, talking about learning that, you know, creatives need this runway. And as I'm listening to you describe it, I do this.
with the cap on.
Oh my God.
And I watched it, and I was trying not to laugh. And then I knew Bryan was watching me trying not to laugh. And then I was watching Bryan trying not to laugh. And it was about to
It was
erupt,
literally because I was laser focused on Will, and I just forgot my physical surroundings.
This is reminding me of like our earlier meetings when we were developing Lie in the Valley. Just lots of mayhem in those meetings, which actually were the precursor to this podcast. It was Bryan and I making your day very interesting, Will, and then me going, I think Bryan and I should do a podcast because this is fun.
Yes, that was a moment in time.
I'm just but Will, I mean, getting back to this.
Anyways,
come on, let's keep doing this. Come on.
That was so funny. But getting back to this idea that it's interesting, you're hitting on something very specific and helpful, is learning that creatives, and yes, this applies to designers. I can't speak as a designer. I can speak as a writer, but both they're both creatives in their whatever work they're doing. This idea that you need the runway, that you need the time to like reflect and get, put the stew on the oven, put the burners on and get things cooking. You can't just mechanically like produce the thing. So it's interesting learning that you need the runway, but then also you as in marketing providing guardrails so people stay on course. So so that's
and I think the other piece too, I 100% agree. Also, I think what's really important is not to underestimate anyone ever, ideally, but giving people ammunition for what works and why is hugely important. And I think that starts with like a really good brief for any type of project, whether you're making a tiny little ad, whether you're designing a logo, whether you're making a big case study video, right? Like, what do you want this thing to be? Who's it for? What do you want them to feel? What's the goal? Where is this going to live? Like, you need that information and you need time to think about it before you share it with people who are going to make it, because they need to trust you. And the amount of times, by the way, and I've done this to Jon many times, that I've created a brief and then midway gone, we need this also, not just 1920 by 1080 for LinkedIn and Twitter. We also need it 9 by 16 mobile for IG story. So just whip that up. And it's like, that shit is not easy to whip up. If you've built something for landscape, all of a sudden making it mobile is going to be a pain in the ass. It changes the entire dynamic of the experience. But if someone like Jon or whoever you're working with has time and knows the deliverables ahead of time, knows who it's for, right? Then they have time to prep, or they have time to say, this is only going to work in one of those places, which is most important, right? Yeah. And the other side of that too is once it gets pushed out, right? Once the work launches, it's not ever done, in my opinion, right? Like the amount of access to data that we have, the amount of information that you can gather about why it worked or why it didn't, because again, you have those goals ahead of time and you know what you're tracking for. Yeah. Like that's vital. That will inform the rest of your marketing calendar, your marketing strategy, your budget. If you want to work with these people again, if it worked and if it didn't, right? There's just so many pieces that you need to be cognizant of. And that's probably my biggest, not complaint, but the weakness of some of the work at Bleacher Report was we put so many things out into the world and we saw followers coming in on social. We saw advertisers coming in. We didn't always do the best job of tracking these things. Whereas at YML, it's been so much more intentional about, okay, we worked on this video for this client. We built that into a case study. We used that case study for award submissions. We won awards. Then these clients came in because they saw that award that we won. Right. We can all of a sudden start drawing lines between, okay, well, it sounds like winning awards helps win new business. Like, it's not a crazy idea, but if we hadn't been tracking it from the start and seen the impact, then we wouldn't keep investing like this. And frankly, my relationship with Jon's team, the studio team, like every single award that we won, which is 30 in the last 2.5 years, which is phenomenal for clients and for YML, we are bound, man, whether you like me or not. Like, gotta make a video. It is like we're making videos and we're changing the way we're telling stories about our work. And to your point, hopefully we're always putting the work first, but it lives within something that feels very YML.
So I have to piggyback off of that and kind of keep talking about this. Will, this is a question from the perspective of director of marketing, but what does it look like to tell stories in the digital product design space?
For me, meaning for YML, everything goes back to impact, right? Like there are a lot of different stories that we could tell about process and about approach and about strategy. And that is important, and it ladders up to how you garnered that impact. But, if Polestar, a great client of ours, which is an electric driving company inside of Volvo, if they came to us and said, hey, our website isn't converting, so we want you to not only make the website look cool, but also make sure that conversion goes up at least X amount of percent.
Yeah.
When the work launches and we have those numbers, I don't care how cool the video looks if the impact sucks.
Right.
Luckily with that one, all of it was awesome, right? It drove impact. The creative was crazy cool. The storytelling around it was then allowed to be more substantive because we had all these pieces to show how we did it and how it worked. And that case study drives an array of business for us consistently now. So I think that piece is just consistently important. But the digital product world, I think it really is just about consistency, right? We know that our target audience is somebody who likely is a senior leader who is in charge of moving really quickly for their business, of managing probably a technology team, a design team, a product team. They are accountable for driving revenue at their brand. They're accountable for an array of technologies for how their product reaches people. And I need to keep all that in mind so that whether it's a case study, whether it's a social post, whether it's an event that we put on, that person is being kept in mind for every single touch point, basically, right? And when things hit, we know why. And when they don't, we learn as fast as we can.
What's rad about this, and it's so interesting because this is a very different episode for us to have, you on. It's just a different aspect of the design world that is very much connected to it. But I think also the idea that it is a monster is what is keeping it separate too much. And I think that this whole conversation is showing how integral it is. Yes, to selling the work that we do to future clients, but I think it needs to be a lot more immersive. And I think at YML, we do a really good job of bringing that all the way down to in Figma, designing components for sites, thinking about the content we're producing. It's very centered around impact. And that has been a culture I've seen since, make a lasting impact has been one of our taglines since I started almost 3 years ago. And, I think what I'm kind of curious about then is that kind of the slay, tame, love, monsters of design thing, that love portion of it, right? And you're kind of hitting on it, I think, with Polestar. But what are those moments where you're just man, this is when marketing and design are just match made in heaven. This is when they're just really killing it together. They're working really well together. Actual teams of people are working really well. And what is that sort of message you have based off that to designers, especially younger ones who are starting to understand, okay, it's not just making things look pretty. It's making sure that there's impact and I'm solving business problems for clients.
Yeah. I think I'll just start with the second half a little bit. And, I was not obviously ever a designer, but I worked so closely with them for so long and still do. And I think the most important way to start there, whether you're a younger designer or not, is it's not different teams, man. It's not a different, it's not us against them. And I just vividly remember when I just didn't understand, I just didn't understand some of the marketing and sales world. And I was more of I'm a content person. I tell stories. It's you feel this pride around money, who needs it? But then it's well,
we all do.
To pay rent. We all want to go have a bite to eat. We want to do this. We want to do that. And I think there's almost like a guilt associated with like doing something that helps the business or something when you're on the creative side. And that just, it is so poorly conveyed by managers sometimes, or by leaders, that like, you're all fueling something together. And that's what I'm always trying to frankly bring to life when I'm working with anyone across engineering, design, product, executives. It's like everyone is in marketing. Sorry. Like every single person is in marketing. And if you don't believe that the post that you throw up on your social is going to be something that somebody is going to remember at some point about you or about that business, like you're not in touch with reality, right? Or if you don't feel like the case study or the project that you're working on isn't going to impact your business, like you're missing out on something that I think is really critical to your potential growth in whatever role you're in.
Yeah, the product director, like design director at Mindbody, who is like August's boss. Wow, he was really great. I really liked working with him. He's at I think he's still there, company called Product Plan. They're like a startup doing like product management for product companies. And a friend of mine who was art director of Mindbody's over there with him right now. But that design director, I remember one time we had a meeting and he just goes, good design is good marketing. And it was just such it stuck with me. Like if you design this well, it will market itself. And that doesn't take away from the efforts that kind of come into play. But I would imagine that good design helps you market things better. And I think it's such a cool nugget for designers to remember. If good design is good marketing. So what you're doing right now is marketing. That's like what you were saying,
Exactly. And like, that's why it's just a super important reason, again, for that sort of transparency between like, if someone on the design side helps me create a graphic for social or, a poster for something, whatever it might be, it's like, I need to show them the value that had, right? In the immediate or in the long term. And I think, again, like the piece that at YML has been really fascinating and I got to touch on at Bleacher Report, but if you do good marketing, it's not just like good design is good marketing, but also it's the rising tide that lifts all boats. Right? Or ships, Brian, I feel like you would know that.
They're
similar. Okay.
It can work. Yeah.
It's winning awards, for instance, not only brings in the next big client, but if Brian's like, you know what, I want to give YML a shot. I'm going to look him up. I'm going to think about this. That's really good for your SEO, right? If one of the first things a recruit sees is that you're winning industry awards for client work and it's a brand that everybody knows, that's going to make them, okay, I'll lean in a little bit more. Okay, I'll go to their careers page, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like if press is helping to drive awareness for the business and you don't need to be following YML on social to learn about them, but you see an article in Forbes or Fortune or Ad Age or The Drum, whatever it might be, all of that, again, contributes to a story about that brand. And to me, I'm accountable for a consistent premium story that attracts multiple audiences, specifically, the target client as well as the target recruit. And those are the people those are my monsters, if you will, right? Like they keep me up at night along with some of our bosses because, they channel them, I channel them, but those are the folks I need to make sure I'm reaching. And I know, I think now after a few years, what works and what doesn't, and need to also be aware of like how to push the bounds of that so I don't get complacent.
Yeah.
So, okay. Complacency. Good lead in for this next question. And Jon, this was something I think actually you came up with, but I want to push this question a little bit because I think it's important. There's been a lot of change in Silicon Valley the last 18 months. And I think one of the things that's come up is, how, in your opinion, Will, in your read on things, how can marketing evolve, remain current, and not fall into the trap of being old, stale, outdated, like a dinosaur? That's a broad question.
It's a broad question, and I think you're bringing in the Silicon Valley piece, I'm assuming, because YML sort of like brands itself around being sort of a company that exports Silicon Valley to the world, not the like bro macho hoodie vibe.
No, absolutely not.
Yes.
But the idea that you're rooted in Silicon, YML is rooted in Silicon Valley. It's telling stories about people in Silicon Valley.
And yes, and I think embracing the part of Silicon Valley that we think is what is transformative, which is moving really fast, leaning into experimentation. All of these words I know are buzzwords, innovation, right? But like if you channel those things as sort of the pillars within how you work, that is definitely intriguing to be it the next hypergrowth startup or an enterprise. So yes, like that part is true. And listen, like this is a dark moment, right? 100,000 people in tech jobs have been laid off in the last month.
Yeah.
People talking about NFTs and the metaverse. It's like, what the fuck? We've got war going on. We've got crumbling economy, right? Like it's a heavy, heavy, heavy moment. And that's stuff going on outside of work. That's stuff going on at work. You got to deal with whatever else is going on in your life. I think marketers being relevant, in this moment, evolving, like you're saying, I think part of it is about really leaning into and owning, again, that piece of differentiation. I just think if you're very, very aware of what distinguishes you from your competition and the value that you bring to that target audience, and then find really authentic, consistent ways of bringing that story to life, that's what's critical. And at Bleacher Report, it was like, we need to reach mass, wild amount of people, right? So we're going to do a national campaign featuring Allen Iverson. We're going to put billboards in Boston, Chicago, Miami, San Francisco, LA. We're going to do a 60-second commercial. There's going to be ads on social. We're going to have influencers, right? At YML, if I did that, people would go, what on earth are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Because we need to hit the chief digital officer at Target.
Yeah.
That guy, maybe he's driving down the freeway, but he's not going to look at his billboard to find his next agency, right? It just is so different. So being relevant is about understanding, where you fit and what value you have, but then knowing what are the right levers to pull to then amplify that message. And then constantly, as I've said, being really aware of what's working and what isn't, letting the data sort of inform the story, but not letting it control, all of it. And I think one of our leaders at YML, who's an AKQA, veteran, he said something for a long time that I thought was really interesting. And again, wildly different from the world that I came to or from. He said, at an agency like YML, we are like a white wall for a gallery, right? Mm-hmm. And our clients are the artwork. I loved that. I'm a visual person. Like that just made me sort of realize, okay, this is so much more clear. But then I got to a point where it was like, well, even the gallery has a point of view, right? Like we have a point of view on which art we're hanging up, mm-hmm. right? Or our founders are immigrants. There's an interesting story there that has helped to bring in a really diverse group of people to our team. That is distinct from other agencies, let alone an array of other companies, especially in Silicon Valley. So should we be talking about that? Are we talking about it to get like credit? We're not looking for credit, but it is interesting, right? So those are the things that are part of measuring, not just, again, like the things that will keep the lights on, but the things that really will build up brand.
Yeah. It's interesting. It seems to me there's the thought of like marketing evolving over time because industries change, the world changes. And what I'm hearing is there's maybe some truth to that, but really the idea of telling a good story and defining what good means, which is relevant, defining what relevant means, and it's why, and it's who, and it's this constant, like that has never changed. The idea of telling a story and making it compelling, that's just at the core, but it's the surrounding circumstances that are evolving, not really in a linear way, but it's just like any multi-directional way, depending on what it is you are trying to build or sell or create, you know?
Yes. And
it's a different kind of three-dimensional evolution, basically.
I was just going to say one brief example, I feel like, of the version of this that is horrible, but unfortunately sort of true. It's like 2 years ago, I got a message from somebody who was like, you know what we need at YML? A TikTok. And I was just like, Jesus Christ. I was just like, you know, and it was partially like, well, our chief digital officers on TikTok, let's go. If we can prove that, and they're the ones we care about, sure. Or are the designers, engineers, product folks who maybe are thinking about coming to work with YML, are they on TikTok? And 2 years ago, it was just like, it wasn't that I was opposed to the idea. I was just like, we need to figure out how valuable this is for us. And also, how do we show up there in a way that doesn't just look like our Instagram or our LinkedIn or our Twitter or like any other agency, you know, cutting videos now at 9:16. It's just like stuff like that. That to me is the right instinct. It's like, oh, there's mass amounts of people here, an opportunity for eyeballs. Like, I think that's where like a lot of marketers and salespeople in particular sort of like think is the right reason to jump into something. But I'm just like, you can't jump too quickly, right?
Yeah.
Because all those posts are going to live on. The people who do see your first ones are going to judge you or not judge you because they've moved on. And I just think, you know, you got to be thoughtful. You got to be intentional, and it's got to live back up and ladder back up to what you care about.
And I mean, I'm thinking about your, you know, talking about your intended audience, describing, you know, somebody maybe in the C-suite, somebody higher up at some brand looking for somebody to tell stories at the digital level. I don't see those people being on TikTok or like, you know, I'm trying to figure out who that would necessarily be.
A lot of people on TikTok.
We can talk about it for a second, right? I bet those folks have a TikTok. I bet they're looking at it whenever the hell they're looking at it, right? But is TikTok the avenue by which they will be inspired to spend a certain amount of money?
Yeah.
Or gain trust through TikTok that we are the right partner for X project? And the truth is, some might say, well, it's a part of the journey, right? It's the top of the funnel down into, you know, consideration and all the other pieces where then they finally realize, okay. And that's why we do invest in social channels. That's why we do invest in an array of content marketing. You know, all of these different avenues, all those levers that you pull, again, need to be consistent, in my opinion, need to ladder back to a really specific tone of voice, look and feel. That for us is that impact narrative rooted in Silicon Valley. But you need to be cognizant of where your audience is. Yeah. And again, for the designer, they might be thinking, well, I'm just trying to make something cool, man. Just trying to, you know, bring this thing to life. I just want it to be special. I don't want to have to worry about that. Well, if you don't worry about that, if you're not cognizant of who your audience is, then what you made isn't really going to see the light of day or see the array of eyeballs that it should, or get the recognition that it deserves. And I think, you know, there's projects that I've worked on that were big time failures, but the work was sick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you the designers involved were not happy. Then when that thing wins an award, and they were so annoyed that I had to have it by a deadline and I need this and I need that, but then they realize, oh yeah, my shit won an award.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and now I get to tell my next job about this on my resume. I get to tell my family. I get to embrace with my team over that moment. And by the way, it's not obviously all about awards. It is a thing within our industry, but you know, that tangible impact is valuable and again, lifts all boats, ships, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think the more leaders and managers and even just teammates can encourage each other is in those moments, like you said, I just want it to look cool, to remind each other, like, you're here because you do make things look cool. Don't worry about that. It will look cool. But first, focus on this, get this right. You don't even have to try. That's just table stakes. Like, I think a lot of times people don't realize, like, it's not easy to get a job at a design agency, especially an award-winning design agency. It's hard. And like, even for me, like, I feel like I had to really like earn it to be here. You know, like I had to put a lot of work in, and it's hard work, and you have to learn and grow and like push yourself and go through really difficult situations. So if you are there, it's because you make things look cool. And I think designers should kind of take heart in that and like, don't stress about that. You will focus on the impact, you know?
And I would just remind, again, everyone across the organization, but definitely that unique relationship between design and marketing, that marketing is a microphone for your work.
Yeah.
Right? It is a spotlight, is an amplifier. Let's look up all these words, find the synonyms, right? Like it is meant to channel the best of what you just built, made, designed, created, and lift it up. And ideally, your marketer in your organization understands where it can drive the most impact, both on an individual level, on a collective level, industry level, and that can be hugely impactful. And not to mention, if you see a designer's portfolio and the work is just gorgeous, right? Like that's awesome. But if the work is gorgeous and comes with like, you know, having done it for brands that are incredibly well known, or you can point to this work led to X, Y, and Z, like it needs to have that through line.
Farther. Yeah.
And I'm just, and my job is to be obsessed with the through line. Like it's not enough for the work to be cool. I put out way, way, way cool shit that did not see the light of day or did not make an impact. And it's the stuff that actually was recognized, did bring in new business, helped hire more people, got press, whatever it might be, that, you know, is remembered and what inspires, I think, more work and more opportunities.
Yeah. Damn. Well, I think that is a really wonderful spot to wrap this portion of the episode.
Good.
And now I'm really curious about
Will, do you know what's coming next?
Monsters.
Yeah.
Monster time.
I'm so curious. I want to know, like, Will, first, before we get to what your favorite monster is, can you walk us through, like, your process here? Like, how did you land on something? Did you not land on something? Like, how was this for you?
What was the...
Oh, I'm still lost. I'm right now, I'm reading Dune. That's been on my mind.
Okay, no spoilers.
Ooh.
I'm reading
I've
it.
only read the first half.
I just watched Endgame, the Avengers Endgame on the way home on a flight. I mean, honestly, how good are those fucking movies? And then also like, you know, like I'm at a family friends right now, and like Monsters Inc. was on because there's kids here. You know, it's just like, yeah, I love what you guys do, and I love the story, and I love this piece. But the dude in Dune, the Baron, if anyone has seen the movie, if you've read the book,
that's a great one.
That is a sneaky, dark, ruthless monster. And
I thought you were going to say the worm, so that's a really good answer.
Yeah.
You know, it's just heavy, and I think also
so creepy.
I saw the movie first, and now I'm reading it. So I sort of, as I'm reading it, anytime I'm like on a moment with him, I sort of have the visual in the back of my head, and they made that character so ghastly looking and huge and just sort of overpowering, but still like slimy. It just bizarre.
That Baron Harkonnen, right? That's such a good answer.
It's just relevant for me right now because of the book.
And it just opens up the Skarsgård lineage of like intense characters. I mean, we got we got
is that I'm
the Skarsgårds, man, they're killing it. And let's just fun fact. My monster has a Skarsgård in the movie too.
Shut the fuck up.
And who's that?
Well, I didn't want to like take over your monster
thing
because we're still talking about Baron, but I'll go because you know what? This isn't a linear conversation. We can go back and forth. So Brian and I were talking about it earlier, and the way this came about too. Brian works with my wife who runs like a wellness branch. It's like this magnesium roll-on brand, super cool. So Brian's working with her on some stuff, and they have developed this ongoing conversation about horror movies because my wife is like super into horror, and I love it too. But I'll go to bed, and she stays up, and just watches horror movies by herself. Like she's super into it.
Okay.
And she watched this movie called Barbarian, and she and Brian were like nerding out about it.
You have to be careful in how you talk about this because you don't necessarily want to spoil narrative points.
Okay.
But
that's true.
Describe the monster.
Okay.
You know what? Fuck it.
No.
Fuck it. Spoiler warning.
No, it's okay. I know how to talk about it without spoiling.
Describe it.
Okay. So anyways, but I forget his first name, but the Skarsgård who plays it is also in this.
Pennywise Skarsgård. Yeah. Not Baron Skarsgård or Viking Skarsgård, which this is so funny because I've kind of mine's kind of related to some of this too.
Yeah.
Continue. Sorry.
So I'm going to set it up at least because that's not a spoiler, but just imagine the horror of the unknown in a really misplaced Airbnb and how that story might unfold in a really like terrifying, horrific way. And I'm gonna not go into it because I want people to watch it. So there is a monster-esque person that is complicated. It's not just all bad. And that's what makes this so interesting. But the movie is just so creative and so unique. And it's so wonderful when a gem of a horror movie like that comes along because like I've watched it twice. My wife has watched it 3 times and it just doesn't get old.
So Barbarian.
I don't want to give it away, but it's the concept of like a monster who's, complicated. And there's definitely a story of like why this is a monster. It's not all bad. It's but it's still super terrifying. And yeah, I don't want to get into it because I think people should watch it. I don't want to ruin it because it's so amazing.
So it evokes a little bit of Frankenstein's monster.
Yes.
In that you feel tremendous sympathy for this rather terrifying creature thing and being that, oh God, I want to say so many words.
I know, right?
Just go see Barbarian. Will, do you watch horror or not?
Not particularly, but when I watch it, a certain kind of horror movie, I appreciate really like just the suspense that can be built. Yeah. Not like into the fear, but like the suspense being built in certain moments. Like I don't want to watch a Mel Gibson movie ever in my life, but Signs, I'll never forget watching that movie because the music, the way things kind of move, the way they use light, it just everything about that is like just building because you only see like the crazy monster in that like what twice or something. It's a 2-hour movie, but yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Wait. I need this is an important question.
Oh boy.
Will, describe what it felt like the first time you saw the alien footage on Signs at that kid's birthday party. That was that terrified my childhood. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did it
impact you? I think I did that. Like anytime a movie gives you a visceral reaction, right? It's doing what it's supposed to do, right? That good marketing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, too soon.
Yeah, John, sorry, I had to interrupt.
Yeah. No. Anyway, Barbarian. Let's do Barbarian.
No, well, I was actually going to throw it back to you, like asking you about that horror movie. Do you watch them? What do they like to you? With the Baron, getting back to that, because that creature of a humanoid deserves, some explaining. What is horrific about that to you? And why is that compelling? And why did that happen to be your answer?
Without narrative spoilers, but describing the physical qualities and some of the emotional qualities.
At this point, there's no spoilers.
If they haven't, hopefully they will. It is a really, really cool movie. It's a little slow, beautifully shot, very heavy. But listen, like the state of this character he is the, I would say, embodiment of deception. And I think for me, and I think maybe as a marketer too, like some people might say marketing is about deception, right? It's about storytelling and maybe like twisting things a little bit. I don't like that shit. Maybe that's also why I've enjoyed YML, because it's like we talk about what we did, we talk about how we did it, and we talk about the impact it had, and then we're out. We don't add anything more than you need. And this character, perhaps, is just, he's got all these little traps that he's setting. and he's undeniably smart. And I think that, I guess maybe when I'm just too much of an idealist, and I'm like, if someone is that smart and can control that much, they should be doing good. And when I see it in a horror movie like that, I'm just kind of like, this person's a piece of shit, and I'm feared by them and the use of power. And I'm not even done with the book yet. I mostly know what's going to happen, but I think that is why that character, the deception, and then the sort of way that, like, does that character have legs? Like, it can move in a certain way.
What is going on there?
Sorry, yeah, I don't fully understand that piece. Just like the whole human nature is also very bizarre.
He's like Satan's version of a helium balloon.
Yeah. Kind of just like every single scene too. Have you ever seen that? It's like a GIF of Brad Pitt in every Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12. He's always eating something.
Yeah.
This character, Baron, is always just stuffing his face, and the way it's written is it's just disgusting. And it's going down his mouth and his chin onto his like robes. And I think just again, like the disgust, the deception, I need one more D. It just not a fan.
I can give you, he's like, to me, he reminds me of the horror of consumption. You know?
Yeah.
It's not a D, but and how he moves through the world is he doesn't just consume food, he consumes culture and people and worlds.
Yeah.
And his appetite is just
and goods.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
It's a great answer. Mine.
How about you?
So okay, so we have Skarsgård, Senior Skarsgård, Baron Harkonnen. Then we have Pennywise Skarsgård and Barbarian. They're both from Viking country. Okay. That's so convenient for me because my monster has to do with Nordic culture.
All right.
So I recently watched
But it doesn't have to do with the Skarsgård.
No, but it's of their people.
Who is a Viking. Okay.
Yes.
It's not that movie, though. What's it called again? Is it called... Wait.
Oh, the Northman?
Northman. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
So
this monster's from a film called The Ritual.
Okay.
By the dude who directed the recent Hellraiser reboot. Awesome movie. David Bruckner's the director. He's fantastic. So Ritual is just about these guys. Just they're out in Europe. Nordic country, let's call it that. And they're just on let's call it a hike. And they end up trying to get back to base sooner, so they cut through a forest. And they encounter this terrifying creature it's huge, and it's on 4 legs, and it has huge antlers. Spoiler warning! I don't mind spoiling this. You find out this monster is a Jotnar. And a Jotnar is a specific kind of being in Norse mythology, and we've seen them in the Marvel movies. Did you ever see the first Thor movie? You know, the big blue giants?
Yes.
The big blue ice giants? That is kind of Marvel's version of a Jotnar. They're big, giant people. But the Ritual, it was creaturely. It was still huge. Think of like a demon moose. You know, big clomping. You can't really see it. For some reason, it can blend into the forest. So it's a big, demon moose, big antlers, and then
that's the band Brian and I are starting. Demon Moose.
Demon Moose, and then attached to its chest is like a face with another pair of hands. So it has its 4 legs, but then at the chest, it is like this little guy, just like
controlling everything.
Yeah, it's so creepy.
It's awesome.
It's terrifying. So I've been thinking about the Jotnar.
I like it. I like that.
Jotun.
One final thing I just want to share. I just finally watched No Country for Old Men.
Fuck yes.
Really?
Javier Bardem.
Yes.
No, I was late to that party. Way late. That's a creepy
cattle prod.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I don't know if I'm allowed to be speaking this way on this podcast.
Hey, man, that's why Brian already established that we have an E on our...
oh, yeah, we can fucking say whatever fucking shit we want to just...
Yeah.
Anyway, it makes us look cool, too, you know? We're like... It's like so the CDs when you're a kid and you're like, oh, explicit?
As cool as that waterproof hat. You know what I'm saying?
I know. It is.
Almost.
You have reminded me I need to wash it, but this hat's really comfortable.
How do you wash a waterproof?
So I need to wash it.
Think about it.
Will's like, yeah, you need to fucking wash that.
No, I'm a big fan. It's the next Monsters of Design piece.
I don't have like sun stains. Like that's part of the design. Like I don't know. It's great.
Yeah.
Now I'm feeling self-conscious about my hat.
I apologize.
Will, this is what I have to deal with. Actually, no, you both are giving me complexes today. It's okay.
That's our job.
So everybody go watch Dune Part 1. I'm very excited about Dune Part 2. I started reading the book when it was announced that it was going to be a movie by Denis Villeneuve. And I started reading the book, and I actually stopped reading it because I preferred to see it as a movie first. So it's the rare sci-fi novel piece of literature that I've not read all the way. So I read like the first little bit. So I'm so curious to see how the story ends. I have no idea.
So you haven't seen the original Dune then?
I have not seen the original. Okay. I don't want to know. I want to experience it for the first time.
Yeah.
The ending as in Part 2. I had no idea, dude. Like going into Dune Part 1, I thought it was about Oscar Isaac is the bad guy. I know it's his dad, but I thought he's bad, and it's about Timothée Chalamet going against his father and like revolting against his dad who's evil and trying to take over the planet. And clearly that's not what happened. So when everything was unfolding, was unfolding, my jaw was kind of on the floor because I was like, I didn't know this was gonna happen. Like
your
it was crazy.
Surprise voice?
That was my surprise voice.
Surprise voice.
So surprised.
So everybody has to go see Dune Barbarian. I think it's on HBO Max.
I think
and go see The Ritual, which is on Netflix.
Yes.
Nice.
That's we're sponsored by all three of those movies.
Yeah. And Will. Thanks, man.
We said it at the same time.
Jinx.
Uh-oh.
Dude, we've been wanting to do this for a long time. I'm so glad we were able to make it work. This has been awesome, dude. Yeah, really.
I really appreciate it. I know it was a bit of a deviation from past guests who have all been awesome, but
this
thank
is
you guys.
Perfect. I mean, that's the whole thing about this is like I want it to. I mean, I would love for us to stray even like outside of like the quote unquote industry. I think there's so much that. I mean, at the end of the day, like design, solving problems. That's it.
Love it.
So, I think we can learn so much from people that are on, maybe a further end of the spectrum when it comes to the core design industry, like when it comes to marketing. But yeah, I think this is kind of the first in us kind of pushing a little bit more outside of it. And I think it's going to bring a lot more insight to the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, dude, legit. Well, I can ask you like questions for another 2 hours. There's just
Will's like, I don't know, but
yeah, I know. I will interrogate, but it's really interesting. And having that perspective as a kind of a sports journalist first is super illuminating. That it's such a cool way to think about shit, and I had no idea. So I just learned some Will lore. So that's that's great.
I mean,
Will lore.
Whether there's a designer out there or a marketer out there or anybody else, frankly, I think having to write is a really good trait to have to learn because, unless you're sort of like journaling, which is fine too, you got to ask questions. And you got to really figure out like what is important, and you got to be able to hook people right off the bat. You got to be consistent throughout that story. Not everyone's going to read the whole story, right? So there's just all those pieces that I think I was unaware that those things were going to infiltrate marketing in the world that I've been in now for a long time. And I'm grateful for it, and I'm grateful for you guys for having me on. So,
yeah, no, dude, absolute pleasure. Jon,
I have one more thing to say before we sign off, and that is,
you have to edit me out now.
Go Giants.
Hey man, you do you. I'm not here to start a fight. Fuck you. I'm kidding. To each their own.